Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Critical EDH. Freaky good. Freaky fast.
Free smells.
Free smells. I'm Eric. I'm here with
Logan
and
Levi.
Two of the moistest guys at Fishbowl.
Oh, come on.
All right, talk to me, you two frog wizard nobles. How's being Glarb pilots going on at Fishbowl?
Not super great for me today. I wrote the Hulk primer.
No
and so
way.
I'm playing Glarb Hulk today
Heck yeah.
and yesterday, and just getting some really bad quality games. Oh well, it happens.
Yeah.
Just got to keep the mental up and keep jamming.
Yeah.
But yeah, not super great for me. How's the control list going?
I'm doing well. At least not as well as I can imagine. And I think a lot of my matches are coming down to, like, my draws and losses are coming down to either decisions I've made that I didn't have enough information to make the correct one, or maybe a little bit of weird other player decisions and things like that. So right now it's coming down to like the finer things. Last round was fucking miserable because I mulled down to 4 in 4 seat, and
That's terrible.
player 2 plays a land, Chrome Mox, imprints a blue source, plays Lotus Petal, plays Thoracle, plays Deconsult, and the player to my right, player 3 goes, guys, I bottomed my mental misstep. And we go,
Oh no!
sweet, man. No shade to that player. Like, I think that's definitely a hard choice to make.
Yeah,
we were all
been
talking about
there.
playing mid-range before the game, and like all of our decks can do that play pattern, right? So those are not cards that are seen outside of Glarb. Like we can all play Chrome Mox, Lotus Petal, play Turn 1 Fish, but it's just like you have to have it.
Yep.
And sometimes you just have it, but like if I were in that situation, I'd go for it. So
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's respectable.
It's rough being in like a control shell and losing to things that are outside of your control.
No, absolutely.
Not a good feeling.
No, 100%. And I mean, my list definitely moves a little bit faster, and it's really difficult to get into a pod where I know this is going to be a grindy game. There are going to be people keeping turn 1 counter spells, and I'm not going to be able to jam my win. So I've got to, pivot into a mid-range mindset for a game that I'm not really prepared for. So
At what
it's rough.
point when you're mulliganing are you like win? I need to draw. Like what's that like for you?
So when it comes to the mulligan, if I get a really good first or second 7 that has a turn 2 Ristic, or a keepable first turn Mystic Remora in seat 1 or 2, usually I'll end up keeping it, especially if I can get an early Glarb out, and I can get maybe just some extra value in some other piece, because Mystic only goes so far. But if I can get a Glarb and a Ristic out, by turn 3, I'm usually sitting pretty.
I think overall our plans are not that different. That is my main game plan is to put an early value engine out, and then if I can't get to that on like molding to 5, then I'm starting to look at like if I can get a turn 2 Glarb, that's kind of good enough. And I think a lot of decks don't have that ability to have that unique sort of semi-value engine in the field. And then in that game specifically, where I lost, the other player was asking me, he's like, what does your commander do? Like, is it a combo piece? And I was like, no, it's like light value. You don't have to worry about it. So he's asking me, like, he's like pressing me with all these questions. He's like, well, do you run this combo? Do you run Doomsday? Do you run? I'm like, no, I don't do any of that. Do you have a different experience, like having to run, or not having to run, but like you run some of those cards, where it's like those game changers,
from what you've said, it sounds like you're on kind of all the the boogeyman cards.
Unfortunately, I am running a lot of like the boogeyman cards. I mean, I ran into a game yesterday where I cast an Entomb, and the table was instantly like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And I'm like, it is an Entomb. Let me entomb my stuff, please. So,
guys, how bad could it be?
I mean, it's pretty rough running a lot of those like boogeyman cards, and especially when I tap Glarb, surveil off, or Protean Hulk in the graveyard. That definitely raises some red flags.
They don't like that very much.
No, not at all.
Not
So,
one bit.
no, not even a little. So it definitely tests my my politicking ability. But this weekend it didn't really work out too great for me. But we'll see how it goes in the future.
Yeah, that's something that statement of like seeing how it goes in the future. I think Glarb is a deck that seems to respond really, really well to player innovation and pilot preference. I mean, even just between the two of you guys, you have super duper different
I think we're
decks.
like 40 cards different or something.
We're
something crazy.
Like, borderline two completely different decks.
Yeah.
You know?
And so I think Glarb is one of those commanders, that as opposed to like Derevi, where you're looking for a specific game plan, Glarb seems to be both in Sultai colors, which is a pretty open wedge, but also in terms of the card itself. There's no really like stereotypical like Glarb player, right? So people seem to come to the deck because it lets them get where they want to go. After a tournament like this, how do you start to evaluate, I want to start taking the deck in this direction, I still want to keep this card in, I just got unlucky. Like, how do you make some of those evaluative decisions on what you want to keep and what you want to cut?
So a lot of those decisions come with a lot of what I'm going to be doing over the next few days is considering the game quality, the quality of the players that I'm playing against, kind of what my placing was, when I go into those games, and how those certain cards performed against those certain decks.
Gotcha, okay.
A lot of the way that I built my deck gearing towards the event was very anti-meta. And so I put in an Aura Thief, geared a little bit more towards Culling Ritual, things like that, to be able to disrupt a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I knew I wasn't going to be able to jam as quickly against, decks like Kinnan.
Yeah.
So I kind of went with an anti-meta approach.
Okay.
But those same anti-meta cards don't really work when you're playing against anti-meta decks, So when I've got two colorless decks at the table, my Aura Thief doesn't do a whole lot on stealing their Rhystic Studies.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be going into kind of being more prepared for an event that isn't so focused on going against TNT and Kinnan.
Gotcha. What about you, Logan?
I'm defaulting back to I need things to be generically good, and I can't run these like pet cards as much. I think that there's a few of these cards that are really strong, like Bane of Progress, where I think that card's just generically good at least in my archetype of Glarb. But I need to be careful with like riding that line of trying to poison pill the meta versus just playing the game.
Right.
And I ran into like you said a few off meta decks today. Hi Sam, we see you.
What's up, King?
I ran into quite a few off meta decks yesterday, and the fact that I was like running into my generically good cards like Mirror Maid and Copy Enchantment really helped me turn the corner in those games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even though if they're like maybe not the best against the meta decks, it kind of smooths out my experience in Swiss.
Yeah, absolutely. I think honestly the first 2 rounds of Swiss is probably the most important rounds of the entire tournament.
Yeah.
And if you're not drawing or winning those first 2 rounds, then you're looking at a pretty grim tournament, in my opinion.
I think I pulled off a win and a draw, and then you start to get matched up with higher tier people.
Yes.
No, like in the event, where they've already won or drawn, and then you're like, okay, well, those are not the decks that are the weird meta decks or the anti-meta decks. You're good.
No worries, man. You're good.
I mean, it's just like. You don't get matched up to like the Winotas and stuff like that as much or as often. Because if you get down into that pit, it's very hard to dig yourself out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's definitely what I ran into this weekend. Not being able to claw myself out of this hole pretty much.
Yeah, we were talking about this back at the hotel room with some of the other players. I think the topic of conversation amongst me and Logan has kind of been on this idea of like stable games versus volatile games.
Yeah.
Even in top pods, they're like super intense, wheeling and dealing, tons of crazy stuff happen. What's up, dude? There's this sense of like everyone's marching towards this inevitable huge counterspell battle that's going to happen 30 minutes over time.
Absolutely. Yep.
On the other track in volatile games, exactly like you said, you've got these decks that you don't see as often, or players who, good players on bad decks or bad players on good decks. And, I got to just have a really fun game against a Grist the Hunger Tide.
Yeah, that's
right?
That's great.
Yesterday, me and a Dr. Madison Lee were teaming up to stop Lake of Tivit.
Wow.
Those are like really
unique.
interesting games.
They're interesting, but they're incredibly volatile and rare.
Super.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't prepare for those. So I also built my deck in a way that I'm like, if I'm against a Tinnin, and if I'm against a TNT, and I'm against another blue farm, I want to be like doing the best. So I'm trying to like greed and kind of like feed off them with like Mirror Maid and Copy Enchantment. But when you're not against those, honestly, same kind of like 3 or 4 decks, if you're trying to like go against the grain, how do you go against the grain against like Dr. Madison Lee?
Yeah. I mean, it's really difficult. And back in my local meta, shout out to the Southern Utah cEDH.
Oh, hell yeah. I didn't know you were from there.
Yeah,
Sweet.
so shout out to them. But back in my meta, we have a lot of very creative deck builders and pilots. And so we see all sorts of crazy stuff. But not being able to get out as much in the past couple months and playing more games online, I've been playing more against those meta decks, and I kind of strayed away from what made my Hulk build good in the early rounds of Swiss. And where you get those volatile games where you're really playing against, again, that anti-meta type type games, and I kind of strayed away from that and geared more towards those higher TNT in type games, and I think that's ultimately where my downfall was this week in particular.
So on our channel, we like to have hard conversations.
Sure.
We like to look at things critically. That's why we call ourselves Critical EDH. We said the name. But
Full credits.
I think you and I have had a lot of discussions in the Glarb Discord, and especially with the other mods there. I may be a little abrasive in like the way I talk online, but I'm very direct. I try to be very direct. And just say, I'm like, that card sucks. Like I don't like. There's no black and like it's black and white to me. Like I don't think it's good or whatever. But I think I'm a little on the dark horse side of things from the Glarb perspective because I think the main archetypes exist, and I'm like the hidden third or fourth thing. And a lot of people don't see it. We don't see eye to eye on that, or at least other Glarb pilots don't. And then other people will say like, wow, I tried to pick up your list, but it's like, it's not working out for me. So from my perspective, I'm like, I'm gearing everything I'm doing for like high level tournament play. I need to get through Swiss. I need to play through these long games and stuff like that. And you and I have had these conversations about it. Are you seeing a little bit more of my perspective and how because I love your list. Like I think the Hulk primer and like everything's awesome.
Anytime Protein Hulk's in there,
2025, man.
Get me in there, bro.
But I think like I guess how do you feel about that?
I mean, absolutely. Your list is 100% more geared towards high level tournament play. And I think that's where it really shines. I think a Glarb list like yours, especially in a smaller league type meta, where people are bringing new and fresh decks and kind of testing the waters with stuff, the deck doesn't work as well. But I think there's still a lot of merit to your deck and what it does. I mean, you've got the results. And I mean, you've obviously spent a lot of time and effort on the deck, and you have a lot of passion for Glarb, and I respect that. But your deck is absolutely more geared towards the higher level tournament play, whereas a deck like mine is more geared towards.
It's still competitive. It's absolutely still competitive.
Absolutely still competitive. But again, you run a lot of those like anti-meta cards, like the Bane of Progress, the Reverent Silence, where you're trying to sweep and then get a good mnemonic deluge in and pull through that way.
Well, so Eric and I were talking like on the way here today, and we're chatting. I was like, I don't know what it is about this deck. Every time I take it to like a big tournament, which has been like 2 or 3 times now, if you count like our locals, we had like a 40 player, and I took it there and did okay. I think I won that one. Like I got 5th in one, and then I won one of the locals, and then I won Snowy Summit after.
Yeah, Snowy Summit's pretty local.
But like every time I take it to one of those tournaments, I'm like, this deck feels incredible. I feel like unstoppable. I feel like I have all the tools I need. And then we play it on like what we call Wednesday nights, like where it's our like local cEDH, just practice pickup games. And I'm like, the deck feels fine, but I think I'm like struggling. Like not struggling, but it's just like not performing the same map.
It feels absolutely different because I mean your play patterns have to be kind of different when you're playing against, again, when you're not playing against Kennen and TNT. And I think there's definitely something to be said about that. And what a lot of people don't understand about cEDH in general is that there are tiers to the decks, and whether your deck is listed online as an S tier deck or not. I mean,
everyone has their own opinions about what's an S tier deck and all that stuff.
Exactly. I think that was one of our first arguments was whether Glarb was an S tier deck or not. But I mean, when it comes down to it, each deck, whether it's on the database or whether it's your own brew, is going to perform differently in different settings. And your deck performing less well during your normal cEDH nights, I think it's completely normal when it comes to because you've geared your deck more towards.
I struggled through like Snowy Summit through the Swiss and like did well enough to make top 16.
Yeah.
As soon as I hit top 16, I'm like, I can relax. Like this is this is where I want to be. I'm in my like zone. I don't need to worry about like dying or losing immediately. I have all the tools I need to push through these untimed rounds, these long games. And yeah, I mean, like I think a lot of decks and a lot of brewers need to start looking at, am I brewing for Swiss? Am I brewing for top cut? Or can I brew somewhere in the middle where I can kind of achieve both, but maybe not as excel at both?
Absolutely, and I think a deck like Kinnan plays really well both into Swiss and in that top cut.
Well, it's the top deck of the format.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why we see it so much. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Back in November when I participated in Salt City.
Oh, nice.
I got 7th, and I did really good through Swiss, felt really, really good through Swiss. And then when it got to top cut, I knew, hey, I really have to buckle down and I really have to, focus on the politics and see what I could jam. And that's where my deck lacked, that's where a deck like yours
I'm definitely looking for those political tools and things I can stretch or push in different ways where I can even just show a card and be like, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, I need you to not... Or like I need you to help me or back me up or whatever. I'm looking for all those tools. So, but yeah, I think that kind of wraps up what we were talking about.
As someone who's not a Glarb player, something I'm taking away from this conversation is I think an additional like layer of analysis that we can add to the lens of like how did the tournament go? How am I as a tournament grinder? Is am I playing in a way that I'm expecting to play with the grain of the meta? Am I expecting to see 1,000 Ristic studies? Or am I expecting to see, like the Winodas or those other decks that are still 100% cEDH? They're still 100% have a spot in the tournament, but you can't like silver bullet them because there's just too many out there.
It makes you worse against other decks if you do that.
And so I think people tend to have a lean towards one or the other. And if you're doing really well, maybe keep leaning in that direction. Or if you're looking for ways to improve, maybe I can reflect and say like, do I have a deck that's generically good against generic decks, or do I maybe need to make some cuts to make sure that no matter what the pod, I always have at least something going on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if people, there are tons of discords for each specific commander. If you are really into deck building a particular commander, join a discord for it, or find some other people that are like-minded and that are kind of looking to do the same thing, and you can draw a lot of inspiration just from similar pilots.
The Glarb Discord is so awesome. Like you guys do a really good job moderating things there and keeping me in line in my special opinions about things. But you guys do a really great job. We've got a really healthy community, and we always have really interesting discussions about like play styles and what it's like to play in tournaments and how we're building decks. And it's one of the unique decks that has a lot of build paths, and like it's just going to be not figured out ever. There's too many options.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shout out to Sully with his first tournament win ever. I mean, his deck was phenomenal at the time, and I mean, he still continues to get results. And then again, shout out to AF Kaylee with her Doomsday list. Performs really well in again that Swiss type of setting on discords like the r/cEDH Discord. But yeah, I mean. Again, shout out to everybody on the Glarb Discord, and shout out to you guys. Thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. It was awesome talking to you.
Yeah, it was great, man.
Heck yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching.